My paws had stopped feeling the cold 3 hills ago. That was how I knew it was serious. I was still moving, still pushing my heavy body through drifts that came up to my chest. Because 4 heartbeats were counting on the fact that I would not stop. 4. A number my own pack had looked at like a wound that needed cutting out. Behind me, Khan's scent was already thinning in the storm. Not fading the way a mate's scent fades when he goes ahead to scout. Fading the way something fades when it is done with you. The blizzard ahead was black at its center. My lungs were pulling in air so cold it felt like swallowing stone. And still, beneath the ice, beneath the fear, beneath everything the elders had called cursed, 4 small lives pressed against my ribs and said, "Keep going." So I kept going. If you have ever loved something more than you feared dying, you already know what carried me through that storm. Stay until the end. Because what this pack of strangers did when they found me will break something open in your chest. Chapter 1. The Shattered Bond. The elders called the gathering before the moon reached its peak. That was the first sign. A summons at that hour meant the verdict had already been written, before a single wolf was asked to speak. I had seen it before, stood at the edge of the circle while the pack's judgment fell on someone else, while I stared at the snow like every other coward in that ring. I had told myself then that I would have spoken, that I would have been different. I had never imagined standing at the center of it myself. My name is Sarka, born to the Iron Crag Pack. In the den beneath the frost-split boulder, the older wolves called the Old Tooth. I had known these ridges since my legs were too short to climb them properly. I knew which gullies held the warmest air in deep winter, which tree lines broke the worst of the north wind, which frozen streams groaned before they cracked. This territory was not simply where I lived. It was what I was built from. Khan was already in the clearing when I arrived. He did not come to my side. He stood to the left of the 3 elders. Elder Bors, with his gray-white muzzle. Elder Dwen, whose left eye had clouded over 2 winters past. And Old Fetch, who I had always believed was the quietest kind of decent. Khan stood among them, like he had always stood there. Like my side was a place he had only been visiting. The circle was full. Every wolf in the Iron Crag Pack, from the senior hunters to the yearlings, barely passed their first real winter. All of them arranged in that wide, unbroken ring that means, there is no door here. You are already inside the judgment. No one looked at me directly. That was the second sign. Elder Bors raised his head slowly. He had a way of moving that made everything feel inevitable, like weather, Sarka. His voice carried without effort. You carry 4. It was not a question. I do, I said. A sound moved through the gathered wolves. Low. Collective. The sound a pack makes when it has already decided something, and is only now letting the one being decided about hear it. 4 litters bring famine. Bors let the words sit in the cold air. The old records name them markers of lean years, prey that moves away, winters that do not end. Those are fear stories, I said. Not law. Khan's ears went flat. The circle tightened by half a step. Every wolf shifting inward without meaning to. The way wolves do when a challenge has been registered, and the body responds before the mind decides to. Name the law, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that even then. If there is a true law, speak it. But if this is only fear wearing the face of law, then I am asking my mate to stand beside me and let us face it together. I turned to Khan. He looked at the tree line behind me. That was the moment. Not the exile, not the cold, not the long walk into the dead lands that came after. That moment, Khan's eyes sliding away from mine like water off stone. That was when something in my chest cracked clean through. Bors spoke again. Your place in this pack is bound to your mate, and your mate has made his position known. I kept my eyes on Khan. I wanted him to feel the weight of being looked at. I wanted it to cost him something. I will not claim a cursed litter. His voice was quiet, flat, the voice of a wolf reciting something he had rehearsed. I am releasing the bond, a bond release. In all my years inside Iron Crag territory, I had heard of it happening twice. Both times, the wolf who spoke it carried the mark of it for the rest of his life. A thing the pack remembered, a disgrace that followed like a shadow. Khan said it without flinching, and the elders said nothing, and the pack said nothing. And I understood then that this had never been a gathering. It had been a notification. Every word spoken, every pause, every wolf staring at the snow instead of at me. It had all been decided in dens I was not welcome in the low voices of the deep night while I slept trusting the pack that was quietly building a case for my death. You will leave Iron Crag territory, Bors said, before the moon moves again. I looked around the circle one final time. I found the eyes of Lyra, a wolf I had run beside through 3 full hunting seasons, whose flank I had pressed against through a fever that nearly took half the pack 2 winters back. We had survived that together. She had told me once, in the quiet after a long hunt, that I was the steadiest wolf she knew. She was looking at her own paws. I turned north, toward the sound of the blizzard that was still building beyond the ridge, toward the dark that had no bottom. Behind me, not one wolf made a sound, and that silence, that complete collective silence from every wolf who had ever eaten beside me, howled beside me, slept beside me through the worst of the cold. That silence was louder than anything Elder Boars had said. It followed me out of the circle. It followed me past the old tooth. It followed me into the storm. And somewhere beneath all of it, pressed warm against my ribs, 4 small heartbeats kept their rhythm. Steady, stubborn, asking nothing of the world yet except that I keep moving. So I moved. Chapter 2. The Deadlands, the Iron Crag scent line, was a thing you felt before you crossed it. Every pack marks its borders the same way. Layered over seasons, refreshed by the senior hunters on rotation, built into the soil and bark and frozen ground, until it becomes less a smell and more a pressure against the chest. A wordless warning that says, this is where we end and the wild begins. I had never crossed it alone. I crossed it alone now. The moment the pack scent fell away behind me, the cold changed. It had been brutal inside the territory. Wind cutting down off the ridge, snow driving hard and sideways. But inside the border there had still been the ghost of something. The faintest trace of communal warmth, of many bodies having slept and hunted and lived across the same ground for generations. A scent that the body reads as, you are not the only one. On the other side of that line there was nothing, just wind, just the flat, blank smell of a land that had never been claimed, never been slept in, never been made into anything by anything that wanted to survive. The wolves of the Iron Crag called it the Deadlands because nothing chose to be here. Things ended up here, sick elk, lone wolves with nowhere left to run, wolves like me now. I kept moving north, because north was the only direction that had not already rejected me. The storm peaked somewhere in the deepest part of the night. I know this not because I saw anything. The dark was total, the snow so thick it turned the air white and directionless, but because I felt the wind change character. It stopped gusting and became a single, sustained wall of force pushing against my left side, trying to turn me, trying to fold me into the ground. My legs were not legs anymore. They were just the things beneath me that had not yet stopped. I was thinking about warmth the way you think about something you once had and cannot fully remember anymore. The den beneath the old tooth. The press of pack bodies on the coldest nights, 12 or 15 wolves arranged in the dark with no order to it, just the wordless animal understanding that shared heat is survival. Khan's flank against mine. His breathing evening out as he dropped into sleep, steady and slow, and the way that sound had always worked on me like a tide going out, taking everything with it, leaving me quiet. I stopped thinking about Khan. There was no use in it. Grief is a weight, and I was already carrying more than my body was built for. I dropped my nose to the ground and I worked. Wind reading is something the Iron Crag wolves learn early because our ridges are vicious in winter. My mother had taught me before I was fully grown. Find where the sound changes, where the wind drops half a note. That is where something is interrupting it. That is where there is shelter. I moved slowly, quartering into the wind, listening past the storm to the shape of the land underneath it. It took longer than it should have. My mind kept blurring at the edges, the cold pressing in through every thin place in my coat, and twice I stopped and stood still because my legs simply refused the next step, without a moment's argument. Both times, one of the 4 shifted inside me. A nudge, a flutter of movement that had no words in it but said everything. I took the next step. I found the overhang by sound, a hollow note in the wind, a place where the storm stuttered slightly against its own force. A granite shelf jutted from the ridge face at an angle, the rock above it curling outward just enough to break the worst of the blow. The space beneath was barely deep enough. Snow had drifted across the opening but not filled it. The ground inside was frozen and bare, and the most shelter I had seen in hours. I turned 3 times, pressing the snow flat with my paws, and I lay down. The shivering started almost immediately. Not the small, managed shivering that a wolf's body uses to keep itself warm. This was different. This was the shivering that happens when the body has spent everything it had, and is now spending what it was saving. I curled as tight as I could, nose to tail, tucking my face against my own flank, and I breathed into my own fur and tried to give back some of what the cold had taken. At some point, I slept. I know because I woke, and waking meant I had been somewhere else. The storm had not stopped. but the dark had thinned to gray, which meant morning had come in whatever grudging way morning comes in the dead lands. Not as light so much as a lessening of dark, and I was hungry in a way that frightened me. A wolf's body, when it is carrying young, will feed the litter before it feeds itself. This is not a choice. This is simply what the body does, what it has always done, what every mother before me learned the same hard way, that hunger arrives faster, cuts deeper, and takes more than it would in any other season. My milk had not yet come. The pups were still inside me, still growing. But the body prepares long before the birth, and preparation requires fuel, and I had not eaten since before the gathering. I found the hare's trail by scent. Faint and close to the ground, pressed into the windward side of a buried log where the animal had sheltered through the worst of the storm. I moved without thinking. My body remembered what my legs had forgotten. The hunt was over in 4 seconds. I ate everything. Every scrap, every small bone cracked open for the marrow inside. I ate with a focus that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the 4 lives that were not going to be lost because their mother had been too broken to feed them. When I finished, I lay back beneath the overhang and pressed my nose to my own flank and felt them move. All 4, stirring in the thin morning warmth as if they knew. As if they were saying, "Good, now rest. Tomorrow we keep going," but tomorrow never arrived the way I expected. Because when the gray finally lifted enough for me to test the air, I caught something on the wind that stopped every thought in my head. Cold. A scent. Coming from the north. A pack. Chapter 3, The King's Shadow. A pack scent on open ground is not one thing. It is many things layered into one. Individual wolves, their age and rank and health, the particular prey they have been running, the specific trees and frozen streams that mark their territory. A wolf who knows how to read it can pull all of that apart the way you pull apart the separate sounds in a howl. I was not at my best. My nose was cold-dulled, and my mind was running slower than I would have liked. But even through all of that, what came off that northern wind was clear enough to understand. Large pack, well-fed, many wolves, many seasons, deeply rooted in that ground, and I was standing at the edge of whatever they considered theirs. I want to tell you that I made a careful decision, that I weighed my options with a clear head and chose the most sensible path. That is not what happened. What happened is that my legs had been walking north for 2 days, and they did not know how to walk in any other direction anymore. What happened is that the 4 lives pressed against my ribs had burned through the hair by midday, and were asking for more, and there was no more, and north was the only place that might have an answer. So I walked north, into a scent that any sane wolf would have circled wide around. I had stopped being a sane wolf somewhere around the moment Khan looked at the tree line instead of at me. The border of the King's Line was marked with a density I had never encountered before. The Iron Crag borders were maintained and clear. These were something else entirely. Layer upon layer of scent pressed into every surface. Bark, stone, frozen earth, the crusted snow along the ridge edge. Seasons of marking, renewed and renewed until the border itself felt like a wall you could almost lean against. A declaration that said not just, "This is our," but "We have always been here, and we will always be here, and you are very small and very temporary. By comparison, I crossed it anyway." I crossed it because I had nothing left to lose that hadn't already been taken. Vane came out of the pine dark on my right. I felt him before I saw him. A shift in the air pressure, the specific silence that falls when a large predator stops moving and starts watching. I turned my head and he was simply there. Gray-coated, broad across the chest, with the particular stillness of a scout who has spent so many seasons reading other wolves that he has learned to show nothing himself. His eyes were pale and they went over me the way a current goes over a stone, finding every edge, every weakness, every angle. I stopped walking. Torque materialized on my left so quietly, I would not have known he was there, except that the wind shifted and brought his scent. Darker than veins, carrying the particular tension of a wolf who is always half a second from action. He was leaner, younger, with ears that tracked independently, reading the surrounding territory even while his eyes stayed fixed on me. 2 scouts, positioned perfectly. I had walked straight into an interception, so clean it almost deserved respect. I did not think about it. There was nothing to think about. I had no rank here, no pack scent that would speak for me, no strength left in my legs that would have made resistance anything other than embarrassing. I did the only honest thing available to me. I lowered myself to the frozen ground, all the way down, belly flat against the snow, chin pressed to the earth, tail still, ears soft and angled back, the full submission, the posture that says, "I am not a threat, I am not a challenge. I am nothing. Do with me what you will. The cold of the ground came through my coat immediately, and I pressed my eyes closed for a moment against the humiliation of it. Not the submission itself. Submission is simply a language, and using the right language in the right moment is sense, not weakness. But the fact that I was here at all, on foreign ground, alone, heavy with pups that the world had already decided to reject, pressing my face into a stranger's snow, and hoping it was enough to keep me alive another hour. Vane moved closer. I held still and let him read me. His nose worked my scruff, my sides, the full length of my belly. I felt the exact moment he found the pups. A pause, a small recalibration in his breathing, something shifting behind those pale eyes. He straightened. He and Torque exchanged something. Not words. Wolves don't need words for this. Just the angle of an ear, the degree of a glance, and whatever passed between them was not good for me. Torque's weight had shifted to his front paws, the posture of a wolf preparing to drive something away. I pressed my chin harder into the snow and waited. This was it then. Driven off the king's line the same way I had been driven out of Ironcrag territory. Too weak to argue, too slow to run. 4 heartbeats inside me with nowhere left to go because their mother had reached the last border there was and it was closing against her too. I thought, I am sorry. I brought you as far as I could, and then the wind changed, and every hair on my body stood up at once. Not from cold, not from fear. From the scent that came with that wind. Something I had never smelled before, and yet recognized immediately. The way you recognize thunder before you understand what thunder is. Power. Clean and absolute and moving toward us through the trees. Vane and Torque both went still. Whatever was coming, even they waited for it. Chapter 4. The Heat of 12. He came through the pines without sound. That was the first thing I noticed. A wolf of that size moving through frozen undergrowth should have made noise. Cracked bark, compressed snow. The small disturbance that any large body makes when it moves through a space. Fenris made none of it. He simply appeared at the tree line the way a ridge appears when the storm cloud finally shifts, not arriving so much as becoming visible, as though he had always been there, and the world had only just decided to let me see him. He was white. Not the pale gray that some wolves carry and call white in low light. Genuinely white, the color of deep-season snow on flat ground where no shadow reaches. Against the dark of the pines and the gray of the storm sky, he looked like something the cold itself had shaped and sent forward. Large, broader across the chest than any wolf I had ever stood near, moving with the particular unhurried quality of a creature that has never once in its life needed to rush toward anything, because everything eventually comes to it. I did not lift my head. I kept my chin against the snow, and my eyes low, and I breathed. I heard him stop. I could not see his face from where I lay, but I felt his attention land on me the way you feel weather change. A shift in the quality of the air. A new pressure. A sense that something large had oriented itself in your direction, and was now reading you the way only a wolf of deep experience knows how to read. Vane made a sound. Low, tight, the compressed warning note of a scout reporting to his alpha. The tone that carries the meaning. Unknown female, foreign pack sent, 4 unborn, recommend removal. I pressed my eyes closed. I had made it further than I expected. That was something. I had crossed the Deadlands, found shelter, hunted, kept them alive through 2 nights of cold that should have finished us both. If this was where it ended, if the King's scouts drove me back into the white nothing beyond the border, then I had at least given the 4 every hour I had in me. I told myself that. I told myself it was enough. I did not believe it. Fenris moved again, not away, toward. His paws settled into the snow, close enough that I could have touched him. And he lowered his head until I felt the slow warmth of his breath against the top of my skull. Reading me the way Vane had read me, but differently. Where Vane's assessment had felt like inventory, counting what I was and what I cost. This felt like something else. Like being looked at rather than looked over. Like the difference between a wolf who wants to know what you are, and a wolf who wants to know who. His nose moved along my side, down to the curve of my belly, and there it stilled. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. Then he straightened, and when he spoke, not in words, wolves do not need words, but in the low specific vocalization that carries rank and decision, and the full weight of a king's authority behind it. Every wolf in the clearing heard it the same way I did. Not a question, not a suggestion, a command. Torque's head came up sharply. Vane's ears pressed forward at something that was almost, not quite, but almost, protest. I felt the tension move through the 2 scouts, like current through still water. They did not want this. Whatever Fenris had just told them, It ran against what they believed was right. Fenris said it again, the same sound. Waiter this time, which made it heavier, not lighter. They obeyed. I heard movement in the trees behind me, not 2 wolves, more than 2. The patrol that had been holding position in the pines, waiting. They came into the clearing one by one, and I counted their paws against the snow without lifting my head. 8, 10, 12 total, with Vane and Torque. They arranged themselves around me. I did not understand what was happening at first. I had expected to be driven. Expected the snap of teeth near my haunches. The pressure of bodies moving against me in one direction, the language that means move or be moved. I had already decided I would not fight it. I would simply walk back into the white, and I would find another way. Or I would not, and either way I would not give them the dignity of watching me break. Instead, they stood in a ring. Close. Not touching me, leaving me my ground, my space, the dignity of a wolf who has not been made into a prisoner. But close enough that their body heat reached me from all sides simultaneously. I had forgotten what that felt like. 2 days of total cold, total aloneness, total silence from every living thing, and now 12 warm bodies standing between me and the wind. My legs gave out. Not from fear, not from submission, simply from the overwhelming physical reality of warmth arriving all at once after the body had stopped expecting it. I went down onto my side in the snow, and I could not get up, and I did not try. And then Fenris settled behind me, between my back and the north wind, the largest, warmest body, placed at the most exposed position, blocking what would have reached me worst. His breathing was slow and even against my spine. I lay in the center of 12 wolves and felt heat return to places in my body I had forgotten were cold, and something cracked open in my chest that I had been holding shut since the gathering. Since Khan's eyes went to the tree line, something I had not let myself feel, because feeling it in the dead lands would have killed me. I felt it now, I let it come, and what came out of me was not a howl, not a whimper, just one long, shaking breath that carried everything in it. The 12 wolves stood steady around me and said nothing and moved nothing, and gave me the only thing that had ever really mattered. They stayed. But when I finally lifted my head, I saw Vane watching me from across the circle, with something in his pale eyes that had not been there before. It was not warmth. It was not welcome. It was a question, and the answer to it, whatever it was going to determine everything that came next. Chapter 5, The Council of Silts. The King's Basin was nothing like I expected. I had built a picture of it during those 2 days in the Dead Lands. Something vast and impenetrable, the kind of territory that announces itself the way a dominant wolf announces itself, with force and volume and the clear intention to make you feel small. What I found instead was a valley that simply worked, sheltered between 2 long granite ridges that broke the north wind before it reached the floor, dense with pine on the eastern slope where the elk trails ran deepest, and cut through the center by a frozen stream, whose scent told me it ran fast and clean even under the ice. It was not beautiful the way open country is beautiful. It was functional, purposeful, a place that had been chosen by wolves who understood exactly what surviving a long winter required. It made the Iron Crag territory feel, for the first time, like something I had only thought was enough. The pack moved around me as we descended, not surrounding me the way the patrol had surrounded me at the border, but present on all sides, in that loose, aware way of a group that is not quite sure what to do with the thing it has brought home. Some ignored me entirely. Others watched from a distance with the flat, assessing gaze of wolves who had not yet decided what I was. A few of the younger ones, yearlings mostly, came too close out of curiosity and were moved away by subtle pressure from the older wolves around them. I kept my tail low and my pace steady, and I did not look at anyone directly. I was a guest here by the decision of one wolf. I had not yet earned the right to meet eyes. I smelled silt before I saw her. Age has a scent, not decay, nothing so harsh. Just the particular deepness that comes from a body that has processed many seasons, many hunts, many hard winters, and come through each one carrying the weight of what it learned. Silt's scent carried all of that, and something underneath it that I recognized from the oldest wolves in the Iron Crag pack. A kind of distilled authority, the smell of a wolf that the rest of the pack has been listening to for so long that deference to her had become something close to instinct. She was gray all over, lighter at the muzzle, with a stillness to her that made Fenris's stillness look recent. She sat at the edge of the flat ground where the pack gathered, not at the center, not demanding attention, just present in the way that a stone at the edge of a current is present. Everything flows around it. Everything is aware of it. She looked at me the way I imagined she looked at everything, like she was counting. She did not approach Fenris directly. A Wolf of Silts experience does not make challenges visible, unless she intends them to land hard. Instead, she moved to a position where he would naturally look at her, and when he did, she held that look with the quiet steadiness of a wolf who has earned the right to be heard. What passed between them I could read only in pieces. The angle of her head, the specific set of her ears, not aggressive, not submissive, something in the careful space between that means, I am not challenging you, I am asking you to think. The pack was watching. Not obviously. Wolves rarely make their watching obvious. But I felt it the way you feel weather pressure, that collective attention settling over the gathering like a change in the air. Then Silt looked at me. She eats from the cache, her posture said clear as a howl. She cannot hunt, she cannot run, she cannot contribute. 4 pups means 4 more mouths after her, and winter has not reached its worst yet. You are asking this pack to carry a weight it did not choose. Every word of it was true. I knew it was true. That was the part that made it hardest to stand under. Not that she was wrong, but that she was exactly right, and she knew it, and I knew it, and everyone watching knew it, and there was no clean answer to arithmetic. I have thought many times about what made me do what I did next. I was 3 days from birthing. My belly was so low it brushed the ground on uneven terrain. My legs had not fully recovered the feeling that 2 nights in the Deadlands had taken from them. The sensible thing, the safe thing, the thing a wolf in my condition had every reason to do, was to stay still and let Fenris answer for me and hope his authority was enough. I did not stay still. I raised my nose into the wind. The elk trail was there. I had caught it on the way into the basin, filed it away without thinking the way a hunting wolf always files these things. Bull elk, large, moving northeast along the upper ridge since before dawn. The scent was hours old, but the direction was clear, and the ground sign would still be readable in the snow. I turned my body toward it. Locked. Every line of me pointed at what I had found, head high and steady, the way a tracker holds point when the scent is true. And then I looked at Silt. Not a challenge, not defiance, just the straightforward declaration of a wolf saying, "This is what I am, this is what I bring. Count that too." The old female held my gaze for a long time. The wind moved through the basin. The pack waited. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard Vane make a sound. Low and reluctant and almost entirely hidden. The kind of sound a wolf makes when something has surprised them, and they do not want to admit it. But it was not Vane's reaction that stopped my heart. It was Silt's. Because the old wolf did not look away. She held my eyes for 3 more seconds, and then, so slightly I almost missed it, the rigid line of her shoulders eased. Just a fraction, just enough. But in the language of wolves, that fraction meant everything. And what it meant was, I am still watching you. But I am watching differently now. What she said to Fenris after that, with the quiet economy of an elder who has never needed volume to be heard, made every wolf in the basin go still. And whatever it was, whatever words passed between them, in that low, careful exchange, Fenris turned and looked at me with something in his dark eyes that had not been there before. I did not know yet whether it was good. Chapter 6, The Quadruplets. It started as a pressure, not pain, not yet. Just a deep, settling weight that moved through my lower body, like a slow tide pulling everything downward, inward, toward the center of whatever was about to happen. I had been lying in the shallow hollow at the base of the southern rock face. The spot Fenris's pack had quietly made available to me without ceremony, without announcement, simply by leaving it empty and unscented when every other resting place in the basin was claimed. I had understood the gesture the way wolves understand most things that matter. Without words, without thanks, just a quiet acknowledgement folded into the act of lying down and accepting what was offered. I woke from a light sleep and felt the pressure and knew. It was time. Vera found me before I had fully processed what my body was telling me. I did not know then how she knew. Whether she had been watching me more closely than I realized, or whether something in my scent had changed in the way a wolf's scent always changes when the body shifts from carrying life to releasing it. She was simply there, moving out of the pre-dawn dark, with the unhurried certainty of a wolf who had done this more times than I had seasons. She was older than Silt in body, if not in authority. Her muzzle almost entirely white, her movements careful in the way that long experience makes careful look like grace. She smelled of deep pine and old milk, and something underneath both that I can only describe as steadiness. The scent of a wolf who has sat with mothers in their worst hours and brought them through. She did not speak. She simply turned toward the upper rock face and looked back at me once. I followed her. The cavern was further into the ridge than I expected. A long, low pocket in the granite, where the stone curved overhead and the wind could not reach. The ground inside was dry, covered in the soft debris of many seasons, shed fur, compressed moss, the faint layered scent of other births in other years. A place that had been used for this before. A place the rock itself seemed to understand the purpose of. Vera settled at the entrance without being asked, her body across the opening, her broad back to the storm that was building outside. A door made of the oldest, steadiest wolf in the King's Basin. I moved to the back of the cavern, and I turned 3 times and I lay down, and then the real work began. I want to be honest about what it was. I have heard wolves describe birth as the moment they understood their own strength, the moment fear became irrelevant, the moment love made everything else small. I do not think those wolves are lying. I think they are remembering from the other side of it, when the outcome was already known. From inside it, what I felt was fear, plain and total and without any dignity to it. Not fear of the pain. The pain was extraordinary, but the body knows pain. The body has a relationship with pain going back to the first hunt, the first injury, the first hard winter. What I feared was the number, 4. The same number that had cost me everything, that had turned Khan's eyes to the tree line, that had made Elder Bors's voice go flat and final, in the clearing under the cold sky. What if they were right? What if 4 was too many? What if my body could carry them, but could not deliver them, could not feed them, could not bring all 4 through into the air, and the cold and the life waiting on the other side? What if I had crossed the dead lands and pressed my face into a stranger's snow, and pointed my nose at an elk trail to earn my place? What if I had done all of that and it still was not enough? The storm outside reached the ridge as the second pup came. I heard it hit the jaw, that granite lip Fenris's pack called the Northern Shield, and the sound it made was the sound of something very large being refused entry. The wind screamed and the rock answered with silence, and inside the cavern the air stayed still, and Vera's body at the entrance held its position without trembling. The third pup was the hardest. There was a moment, I will not dress it up, where my body and I had a disagreement about whether we were going to continue, where everything in me that was exhausted and cold and 3 days past what I should have been capable of said, "Stop. Rest. You have done enough." I thought about the clearing, about Lyra looking at her paws, about Khan's voice flat and rehearsed. I will not claim a cursed litter. I thought about what it would mean if he was right. I pushed. The 4th came quietly, as if it had been listening to the difficulty of the 3rd, and had decided to make things easier. Small, the smallest of the 4, and for one terrible second completely still, and I felt my heart stop in a way that had nothing to do with my own body, and everything to do with the 6 weeks I had spent talking to this one in the dark, feeling this one move against my ribs when the cold was worst, this one who had always been the most active, the most insistent, the most determined to make itself known. Vera moved with a speed I would not have believed her body capable of. Precise, practice certain. 1 second, 2, and then, thin and furious and absolutely indignant at the temperature of the world it had just entered, the sound, all 4, breathing, searching, alive. I pressed my nose to each small skull and I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted them until the number stopped feeling like a curse and started feeling like what it actually was. Mine. But when Vera lifted her head and looked toward the cavern entrance, the expression on her face was not the quiet satisfaction I expected. It was alert, listening. Something was outside. Chapter 7. The First Howl. I was on my feet before I knew I had decided to stand. Every new mother knows this reflex. It lives below thought, below exhaustion, below even the fog of the hours I had just come through. Something outside. Something unknown. 4 pups behind me that had been breathing for less than an hour. The body does not ask permission for what it does next. It simply puts itself between the unknown and the small, and it waits. Vera had not moved from the entrance. She was reading whatever was outside with her nose, her ears angled forward, her posture neither alarmed nor relaxed, but somewhere in the careful space between. After a moment, she turned her head and looked at me, and what her face said was, "Not a threat, but your decision." I held my position, and I waited. And then his scent came through the entrance ahead of him, the way a dominant wolf scent always arrives before the wolf does. Not pushed, not forced, simply present because the air around him carries it naturally. The way cold carries the smell of snow, deep, steady, the particular scent of a wolf who had blocked the north wind with his body while I shook myself back to warmth on a stranger's border. Fenris. He stopped at the cavern entrance, and did not come further. This was the thing I kept learning about him. In those early days, The thing that made him different from every dominant wolf I had known inside Ironcrag territory, including Khan. He always stopped at the threshold. He never pushed into a space that was not his, simply because his rank meant no one could stop him. He stood at the entrance of my den with his large white head lowered slightly, his posture open and unthreatening, and he waited for me to decide what happened next. I looked at him for a long moment. I was exhausted in a way that went past the body and into something deeper, the kind of tired that comes not just from physical effort, but from the weight of everything that had happened since the gathering, all of it stacked and pressing. I was also still half-positioned between him and the four, because the reflex that had put me on my feet had not yet stood down. He saw all of this. I could tell he saw it by the way he held still and let me look. I stepped aside. He came in slowly, keeping his body low and his movements small, the deliberate language of a wolf, making himself unthreatening in an enclosed space, communicating with every line of his posture that he understood this was mine, that he was here on my terms, that the size and rank he carried outside this cavern had been left at the entrance. He reached the four and stopped. I watched his face. I could not help it. I needed to see what he saw when he looked at them, needed to read whatever lived behind those dark eyes, when they fell on the thing that had cost me everything I had ever known. Four small bodies pressed together in a tight, warm heap, their eyes sealed shut, their ears flat and new, their paws so small they did not yet look real. The smallest one, the fourth, the one who had frightened me, was already pushing against the others with a determination that seemed excessive for a creature that had been breathing for less than 2 hours. Fenris looked at them for a long time. Then he lifted his head and he looked at me. And what was in his face was so plain and so direct that it hit me somewhere I had not been expecting to be hit. Not pity. Not the careful, measuring assessment of a leader calculating what 4 pups would cost his pack through the rest of the winter. Recognition. The look of a wolf who understood exactly what it had taken to bring these 4 to this moment and was not going to pretend otherwise. I looked away first. I did not trust what was happening in my own chest. He stayed for a while longer, quiet in the way the cavern itself was quiet. The storm still running hard outside, muffled by Rock and by Vera's steady presence at the entrance, but the inside of the den holding its own small warmth against all of it. At some point, 2 of the 4 registered his scent and turned their blind faces toward it, with the instinctive curiosity of pups, whose world is still entirely smell and warmth and pressure. He did not move toward them. He let them find the scent and process it in their own time. Then he rose. He moved back toward the entrance with the same careful quietness he had entered with, and before he stepped back out into the storm and the dark, he stopped and raised his muzzle. Not high, not the full throat-stretched posture of an assembly howl, just enough. A directed sound, aimed at the basin below where his pack was gathered, low and specific and carrying the precise frequency that I had never heard used for anything before. I did not know the call. I was not from this pack, and I did not know all of their language yet. But Vera did. I saw it in the way her head came up, and her eyes went soft with something I had not seen on the old female's face before. Later, much later, when I knew this pack's howls the way I knew my own heartbeat, she told me what it meant. The call Fenris sent into the storm that night was old. Older than the king's line. Older than any wolf alive could remember learning it. It was the call a king sends when something has entered his territory that falls under his personal protection. Not a guest, not a refugee, not a mouth to be counted against the winter cash. A ward, a charge. Something the Alpha places his own life in front of. He sent it for all 4 of them. One call, carrying 4 lives inside it, aimed at every wolf in the basin who had wondered what these pups were going to be allowed to mean. And the pack answered. Not all at once. It came in pieces, voice by voice. The way agreement builds in a pack when it is real rather than commanded. First the patrol wolves, then the senior hunters, then the younger ones. Then, last of all, from the far edge of the basin where I knew Silt kept her resting place, one voice, old and deep, and carrying the particular resonance of authority that has been earned rather than inherited. The old female had answered. I lay my head down over my 4 sleeping pups, and I closed my eyes, and I let the sound of 30 voices wash over the stone above me, and I did not try to hold back what it did to me. I was not alone anymore. But in the morning, when the storm broke and the pack began to move again, I would learn that not every voice in that chorus had meant what I thought it meant, and one of them had answered for a reason I had not yet been told. Chapter 8. Echoes of the past. The loner came through on a morning when the first real warmth of the season was finally reaching the basin floor. I smelled him long before the patrol brought him in. The particular scent of a wolf who had been moving alone for many days, carrying the accumulated exhaustion of too many territories crossed too quickly. The faint undernote of a pack scent so old and faded it was barely readable anymore. He was thin, not the lean, functional thinness of a wolf in hard pursuit, the deeper kind, the kind that speaks of missed hunts and poor shelter, and a body that has been asking more of itself than it has been given back. Vane's patrol brought him to the flat ground at the basin's center, with the careful neutral efficiency of wolves who have done this many times. Not rough, not welcoming, simply, you are here, you are contained, wait. I watched from the ridge above, I did not go down immediately. I had learned, in the years since that first night in the cavern, that my reactions were worth managing, that the body has its own memory, completely separate from the mind's, and that certain scents and sounds and situations reach that memory before reason does. I had learned to give myself a moment, to stand still and breathe and let the first wave of whatever was coming move through me before I decided what to do with it. The loner carried iron crag scent, old, degraded, barely there, but present, the way a scar is present, not the wound anymore, just the record of it. I breathed it in and I let what it did to me happen, and then I came down off the ridge. He told his news the way loners always tell things. In pieces, without structure, the information shaped more by what he happened to remember than by any sense of what mattered. He had passed through the Southern Territories 3 weeks back. The Iron Crag border markers were sparse, poorly maintained, the scent lines thin, in places where they should have been dense. The pack that had once claimed those ridges with the deep, layered confidence of a territory, held across many generations, now marked it like a pack that was not entirely sure the territory still belonged to them. Khan's name came up without my asking. Still leading, the loner said, but leading what was less clear than it had once been. 2 senior hunters had left in the 2nd year, a voluntary departure, which in pack terms is a particular kind of verdict on the wolf at the top. Prey had shifted its winter route, and the pack had not adapted quickly enough, missing 2 elk runs that should have been straightforward. Elder Boars was gone. The cold, or age, or both. The loner did not know specifically. Elder Dwen had lost her other eye and no longer left the communal den. Old Fetch, the one I had always believed was the quietest kind of decent, had not been seen by anyone the loner had spoken to in over a season. The pack survived. That was what he said when I asked directly, the one question I let myself ask. They survived. I stood with that for a moment, just a moment. I had imagined this, in the early days in the Deadlands when my mind needed something to hold on to. Imagined the day I would hear that Khan's voice had finally cost him what he had so carelessly thrown away. I had thought it would feel like something sharp and bright, like the particular satisfaction of a hunt that goes exactly as planned, clean and complete. What I felt was quieter than that, and older. I felt pity. Not the generous kind that makes the one feeling it look good, just the plain, tired recognition of a wolf who had made a calculation based on fear, and was now living inside the walls of that calculation, probably not even understanding fully what had been lost. Only that something had gone out of the territory like warmth goes out of a cooling body, gradually, then all at once, and impossible to name until it was already gone. Khan had looked at the tree line instead of at me. He was still looking at it. That was the saddest thing I knew how to think about him. Not what he had done to me. I had carried that across the Deadlands and set it down somewhere in the King's Basin, and never picked it back up. But the fact that in the years since, with everything that choosing fear over sense had cost him, I doubted he had found his way to understanding why. Some wolves never do. I left the loner to Vane's management, and I walked back up the ridge to where my 4 were running the upper slope. They were not small anymore. That still caught me sometimes. The distance between the 4 blind, furious, indignant creatures who had entered the world in that stone cavern during the worst storm of my life, and the wolves they had become. The eldest was broader than Khan had ever been, with a gravity in his stillness that the younger pack members already deferred to without being asked. The second had become exactly the scout I had seen in him early, quick, tactical, reading terrain and wind, and the behavior of prey with a fluency that made Vane, who was not a wolf who gave praise easily, say once that the young wolf tracked like he had been born knowing the land. The third could follow a scent across ground that should have lost it entirely. The fourth, my smallest, my last, the one who had frightened me with his stillness in the first seconds of his life, had a howl that carried further than any wolf I had ever heard. On still nights, it reached past the jaw and across the deadlands, and I like to think it went further still, south and south, into territory that had once decided 4 was a curse. Let them hear it. Let them count voices and understand what 4 had become. Fenris was on the high ridge when I reached it. He did not ask about the loner. He would hear the report from Vane in his own time. In the careful, thorough way he heard everything. He was watching the 4 run the slope below, with the same expression he had worn the night he came to the cavern, and looked at them for the first time. That plain, direct look that never seemed to calculate anything, only to see. I settled beside him. Our shoulders touched. The quiet, unannounced contact of 2 wolves who have stood in the same place so many times, that the body simply knows where to go. Below us the 4 ran, and the basin held its warmth, and the pack moved through its morning in all the ordinary, functional, sustaining ways that a healthy pack moves. Hunters coordinating without needing to speak, yearlings practicing on the lower trail, the old wolves resting in the good light spots where the ridge broke the wind. My home, built from nothing. From 4 heartbeats and a border I had no right to cross, and a white wolf who had stood between me and the north wind and simply stayed. I pressed my nose briefly to Fenris's ruff and breathed him in. He turned his head and rested his chin for a moment on the top of my skull, a gesture so small and so complete that it had no name in any howl I knew. It didn't need one. Below, the smallest of my 4 stopped running and raised his muzzle and sent his voice north, the way he always did, for reasons I had stopped questioning. Long and clear and carrying, a sound that had no grief in it and no score to settle. Just the full-throated declaration of a wolf who knew exactly where he stood and wanted the whole of the north to know it too. One by one his brothers lifted their voices and joined him. 4, always 4, the number that had once been spoken like a wound. I raised my own voice last, threading it through theirs, and what we sent into the morning air was not a warning and not a challenge and not a plea, just a family, whole and loud and unashamed. Still here. You just read the story they tried to silence before it was even born. 4 pups, no pack, no mate, no warmth, and she still won. Subscribe, share. Right now, before the algorithm buries this. The wolves of the King's line are just getting started. Season 2 is coming, and what happens next will make this look like the calm before the storm. Comment below. Team Sarka from day 1, or did you only believe in her after the living den? Be honest.